Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to show you guys a couple things this week. The first thing was how to create a cakesicle, and the second thing was a new texture that I've been playing around with. So I got my mold off Amazon. It was $7. It came with the popsicle sticks as well. Of course, every time you get a new mold, you want to make sure that you sanitize it. The first thing you want to do is melt your chocolate down nice and smooth. Make sure there's no clumps in your chocolate, and then go ahead and pour an even layer into the bottom of each mold. So once you have your chocolate poured in, you can grab a spoon or a spatula, or you can kind of do as I did and kind of just make sure your chocolate is evenly coated around the entire mold, going all the way up until that ledge. Once your chocolate is evenly coated, go ahead and wipe off any excess. And it is important that you get this chocolate all the way up to the ledge, because once this chocolate hardens up, it's going to act as a barrier when you place your cake pop mixture into the mold. Another thing that I would suggest with this specific mold is there's a little insert where you're going to be placing your popsicle stick later on. Sometimes that melted chocolate can kind of find its way to that little hole. If that happens, just kind of wipe off any excess, because once your chocolate sets up, it's going to create a barrier also. So when you go to place your popsicle stick later, you can crack your chocolate and just have kind of a hard time placing it into the cake pop. Once your chocolate has been set up for a while in the fridge, it's now time to go ahead and add your cake pop mixture. When you're adding your cake pop mixture, the easiest way that I found to do this was to kind of roll it around in my hand, make sure you have an even amount in each one, and then kind of press it down lightly into the first half of your mold. You do want to make sure that you leave a big enough gap around the sides of your cake pop mold and on the top, because we're going to be adding some additional melted chocolate to this, and we want it to be able to meet up with the first set of chocolate that you had poured in. So that way when you pick up your cake pops and you go to pull them out of the molds, you don't see any of that cake pop mixture when removing it. All you see is the melted chocolate. So leave a little bit of a gap on the top and on the sides, and go ahead and smooth it out as much as you can, and go ahead and give it a quick tap on your table just to help ensure that this chocolate does make its way down into those grooves. So now is a great time to go ahead and remove any of that excess chocolate that has kind of acquired its way up to the sides of the mold. You do want to make sure that it is nice and thick, so if you are not able to remove so much of that chocolate from the outside rim, that's perfectly fine. Once it's set up and it's completely hardened up, you can always take a sharp paring knife and kind of work your way around the edges just to make sure they're nice and sharp. So what I did not do in the video that I do highly recommend is dip the edge of your popsicle stick into some of that melted chocolate before putting it into this little insert part, just because it kind of helps secure the popsicle stick to your cake pops. And see these little white protruding pieces right here at the end of the mold? This is just to show you how far in you would like to press your popsicle sticks. So go ahead and press those completely in until they match the edge of that white protruding piece. Go ahead and pop it in the freezer for a good 2 hours before you check them. So for this cake, I decided to use 3 8-inch rounds. These are cherry chip cakes. I did want to add a little bit of additional flavoring into these, so I took some of my extra maraschino cherry juice, put it into a spray bottle, and kind of gave them a nice good spray. And then of course you want to let your juice soak in before you decide to start decorating. So to decorate, I took a little bit of buttercream, spread it onto my cake round. This is just to help ensure that your layers stay still for you, so that they're not sliding around when you're decorating your cake. So now it's time to fill and stack. Of course, you can put whatever filling you would like to put in between your cake layers. What I decided to do was a layer of buttercream, and then I decided to cut some maraschino cherries in half and place them in between my layers, just for a nice texture and a little bit more cherry flavoring. So what you do want to do if you put some cherries in between yours as well is sometimes when you're pressing the layers on top and you're kind of pressing down to get some of that excess air out from in between your cake layers, your cherries can kind of slide around. So if you keep them a little bit away from the edge, it'll be just a little bit less trouble for you later, because sometimes they can kind of find their way out from in between the cake layers, and you'll be kind of pressing them in while you're decorating your cake, and you kind of just want to save yourself some time. So just try to keep them away from the edges if you can. So of course, your final layer of cake you do want to place upside down, so that way the smooth side is up. So now it's time to do your crumb coat. A crumb coat is important, especially if you're trying to get a really pretty decorated cake, because you don't want to have to worry about any crumbs peeking through. This just kind of helps ensure that they are glued into place. So I always like to fill in the little gaps where the 2 layers of cake meet first. This helps kind of press out any additional air that can be kind of trapped in between your layers, so that way you don't have to worry about any bubbling later. So go ahead and do your crumb coat, get it nice and smooth, and then pop it in the fridge to set up until it is firm to the touch. So once your cake is nice and set up, it's time to go ahead and add your final layer of buttercream. I'm going to show you this texture here, but I first wanted to show you how I got to it. So just because I was using a combed bench scraper, I wanted to try this out with 3 different colors because I thought it would be a nice contrast with the blue drip that I'm going to be placing on this cake. So go ahead and get whatever colors you want. In this case, I decided to use green, blue, and white buttercream. And you want to put a nice thick layer on so that way when you're kind of scraping it around, sometimes some of that excess buttercream can come off. So you want to have it nice and thick, and if you see any thin spots or any air bubbles, just go ahead and pack in whatever color you decide and make it nice and pretty. So go ahead and take a nice smooth one time around with your combed bench scraper, and then what I did was held it vertically and kind of took it up, down, and up again, and kind of created this nice pretty texture. You do want to make sure that you're taking your bench scraper and kind of scraping it off and cleaning it in between each pass or every other pass, so that way you don't have too much additional built up buttercream kind of packing its way on your cake. If you get any on the edges, go ahead and smooth it out. It doesn't have to be completely perfect in this case because we are adding a drip to it, and it's pretty good at filling in any gaps that you may have. So I wanted to show you guys, my cake pops have now been in the freezer for about 2 hours. I've pressed them, they're nice and firm. So once it's kind of released, you want to go ahead and press on the top up and then press on the popsicle stick out at the same time so that you don't rip your stick out of your cake pop. Once you have this done, go ahead and place them onto a sheet of wax paper or parchment paper and then decorate as you please. So what I decided to do to decorate was take some blue chocolate ganache and kind of pour it into a very tall cup so that way I could just make one pass down into the cup, lift it up, let some of that excess drain off, and then go ahead and place it down onto my parchment paper. And I actually put mine in the freezer to set up for a little bit so that way when I was decorating it was firm, I didn't leave any fingerprints on it, and it would just made the process a little bit easier. So what I did to decorate was I took one of my Cakesicles and propped it up with a wooden skewer and put it down into the top of the cake, and then I took another one and laid it flat right next to it, and then I got a little bit carried away with the ganache here. I was gonna just leave a little bit looking like it was kind of melting off of each one, but I just thought that the texture looked so pretty with the ganache kind of dripping over it, so I went ahead and took that ganache all the way around. When you are putting ganache onto a cake, you do want to make sure that your cake is nice and chill, because if you put hot ganache onto a not chilled cake, it can kind of melt your buttercream and then you'll have quite a mess later on. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you again for watching, and if you have any questions, comment below.